2004 Acura. My wife bought it. It had 500 kilometers on it. I backed into a post, put this dent in it. We ended up taking it to Leggett, asked them to do a good job on it, but as you can see, really didn't do the job I wanted him to do. So I'm going to sandblast this off and get rid of this Bondo that's in here. I'll see what else he's done in here. And on the other side, my daughter had the car out, and unfortunately somebody came along in a parking lot while she was in the store, and we've got a dent in here, we've got a dent all the way down in here, and a score line in here, and we've also got a dimple right there. So all of that I'm going to attend to now that I've got the valve set up on the car and just a little bit of body work. Okay, here's my compressor, the 4-cylinder air compressor rated at 35 cubic feet per minute at, I believe, 135 pounds per square inch. And you can see it's on the PTO of the tractor. It's always good to have a tractor with a PTO. You never know what you're going to use it for. Maybe you'll never use it, but when you do have the opportunity and you have it, well, you're all set to go. So, drive is on here, it's connected to it, and if you take a look, compressed air line comes down here, and we follow that compressed air line, and it's going to go up to the air dryer, which is a chilled refrigerated air dryer, and I've marked them in and out, and the out is a dry, and the in is always going to be your wet, and that's what's marked on the hoses. And those hoses, 3/4 inch hoses, go over to the 150-pound sand hopper, and that goes outside. And here's our nozzle sitting on the floor, and then I have a full, professional type hood and helmet. And you always wear a respirator inside that as well in case of any fine particulates. I don't use filtered air. I'm using the air from the compressor. So charcoal canister with particulate filters. So if there's anything hazardous in there, it's going to suck it out. And that's your breathing air. Stops the inside of the mask from fogging up. So what I'll do now is start up the compressor, the tractor, and give us some air. And then we'll charge it up. I won't be filming while I sandblast. It won't take long with this machine. Probably a couple of minutes just to clean everything off. See, I've put the stopper in the hopper. You can see the compressor. I've only got it at 1500 RPM. When I blast, I'll bring the compressor up to the engine on the tractor up to about 2200 RPM to manage the flow. But you can see how quickly it actually fills the hopper up. I'll just go around to the back of the tractor. I've got a pressure gauge on this. We're already at 120 pounds coming out of the compressor, so I'm going to rev this thing up and get suited up and blast, and then I'll show you what it looks like after the sandblasting has been done. Okay, so you remember all that rust? That's what it looks like now, so I've got something here to work with, plus it's cleaned up pretty good. It's got a couple of high spots in here, but I might just knock that down after. And now if we get on the other side, what we can see certainly is all the dust that is generated from the sandblasting process. And unfortunately I had the door open a bit here. I should have put a tarp over it, but I had to put this piece of wood here to mask so I didn't damage the paint on the good door. So anyways, that's what it looks like, and the next step will be to be welding some pins on here so I can take a slide hammer and start to pull this back out, and certainly dust it off before I get it in the garage. Here what you see is these are pins. You get them from Eastwood, and they're just steel with a little bit of a pin head on it. They're copper coated, and what they do is they go into this slide hammer here, which has got a knurled wheel on it, and you can, once you've welded them to the body, you use the slide hammer to pull the dent out, and that's what I've done here. I've gone along the center of the dent line, and what I'm going to do is take the slide hammer and just start pulling these pins one by one, giving each one a little knock. There was a long crease in here, so some of it came out with the sandblaster. It has a tendency to warp the metal a little bit to cause it to rise. So I might have to do a little bit of slapping to bring that down. But in this period here, it's right along the center, so I'm going to pull that out, and there was one dimple in here, so I'll do the same thing with that. So I've spent about 10 minutes here just pulling on each of these pins with a slide hammer. The odd one has popped the weld, for instance here and here, and a couple here, but it's flattened it out quite a bit, so that's good. So now what I'm up to is I'm going to take my angle grinder, my 4-inch angle grinder. I'm going to grind those pins off, grind off the little nubs, and see what I've got left. I might have to knock it a little bit with my hammer to flatten it out if it's got a little bit of a high spot, and then I'll grind it back with a bigger grinder with a flap wheel, and put on some body filler and start working the contour back into what it should be. What happened here was the grinder got away on me and I cut a hole through the body, and with this little MIG welder you just keep working around the edges until you fill the hole in. Doesn't look pretty, but it doesn't matter. It's going to get ground flush anyways. The welder I'm using here is a Subura. This is an Italian-made MIG welder, and it's very good for body metal. It's got it puts down a very flat bead. I mean, your skill level has something to do with it, but the machine also has something to do with it. Now, I've had this machine for, probably 25 years, and back then I paid $600 for it, and I have pretty well had to do nothing to it. Just one of those kind of machines. The gun I had to replace with a standard gun. It came with a cheesy gun, so I upgraded to a better gun. But apart from that, I haven't done anything to this machine. And that's the hole that was welded in, and I've just ground it flat. A little bit more dressing up here, but there's a little bit of a bump here, so I might have to knock it one way. But some filler in there will get that little pit. And I've got a little bit here that I wasn't able to pull out, so we're going to grind this down a little bit more with a flap wheel and get it prepped up for some Bondo, and I'll get onto that next. Next on the bodywork. Okay, what we've got is a gallon of Premium Plus One auto body filler. Do not waste your time going to Canadian Tire. They charge you 4 times what it costs, and the product is maybe not as good. This is just, you're going to mix up a small amount of body filler. There's no sense mixing up too much because you only got a certain time to work with it, and you got to be able to work the area that you're in. And what we use is a cream type hardener. I'll show you that in a second. Okay, the blue there is the hardener, and depending on where you're working, if it's really hot out, you don't put as much. If it's a little bit cooler, you put a little bit more, and that kicks it to give it some heat for this stuff to cure. So you blend that in until it's all a constant color, and the next picture you'll see is me after I spread it on the work area. That amount that you saw on the mixing board, and that mixing board was just a piece of melamine is what we call it. You make cabinets out of it. It's just scrap. It doesn't matter. I'm going to burn it in the stove eventually anyways. So what ends up happening now is you spread that out, and it's got to cure a bit. And once it cures, and I'll show you how to test for when it's cured, you use a cheese grater, or what they call a surf form, and some rough, this is like 40 or 60 grit paper. I think that's 40. And there's a bigger one. You use a wire brush to clean the little bits out when it gets plugged up, no big deal, and you grate it like cheese. But the only way you know how to grate it is you have to scratch it with your finger, and when it leaves a white mark, a lighter mark, then you know it's ready to be worked. And you don't want it to get real hard, because now you're going to be having 5 times the effort to sand it. You want to work it when it's semi-soft so you can get the rough contour of it. Then once you get it to that point, you use the sandpaper and you start to work towards the contour you want. You're going to have to maybe put another thin coat on it, or some people use a glaze, but I like this stuff here. It glazes better than the glaze, and it's easier to sand. And then you get into blocking, but that's another process in itself. So when you're going to test for when the body filler is ready to work, you put your nail on it, and if you can see a line that it's a lighter color, then you're good to go. And you want to get on it just gently at first with the cheese grater. You don't want to get too crazy with it. No phone always. You start grating it. Cheese grater's been used, and you can see we took out some of the bumps and the lumps. We're getting kind of close down to the metal. We got a little bit of some pits here, but we still got some more sanding. It's still proud. And as you can see on the floor, well, there's the cheese that we grated off. Unfortunately, the phone rang. It was my wife, and I had been away for a couple of days, and of course she wanted to talk to me, and naturally this got a little bit farther ahead of me than I wanted it, but it's okay. It's got a little bit of a bump. I'm going to start working it down now with the with with a 60 grit sandpaper, and I'll give you a shot of that afterwards.